So now we have the professional inspections issue, which is separate and apart from the attorney modification paragraph, but often gets handled at the same time. So the first issue is something we've never had in our contracts in the Chicagoland area before, but this is paragraph 11, which is the buyer's waiving his right to have any home inspections or any kind of inspections done at all. So this is not going to happen all the time. This again happens in, strangely enough, high price ranges, low price ranges because that's where investors play around, and they don't need to have professional inspections done. Most of the investors are their own inspectors. They know what they're looking for. And in the upper price ranges, in many cases, the buyer had his inspection done with the seller's permission, by the way, prior to even writing up the contract, or that was A, or B, he's pretty sure that this guy took care of his $1 million house. And even if he didn't, our new guys got the ability to take care of anything that came up. Or C, they even know each other half the time, or the seller has already done his home inspection and the buyer is willing to take the seller's home inspection in lieu of having his own done. There's a lot of reasons why it could happen. I want you to talk to your managing brokers about this. We are recommending that the brokerage companies have a form of some kind that your buyer signs to get you out of the loop of liability if they decide to waive their professional inspections. I have investors that I work with, and I will tell you that I even recommend my investors have an inspection done, because I think everybody should have an inspection done. So it is something you want to talk to your managing brokers about if they waive it, okay, if they're going to waive it. So the next paragraph is the professional inspection paragraph. And obviously it's not applicable if we use paragraph 11. And it says the buyer can conduct at his own expense. And let me explain what the parens means: unless payment for such expense is otherwise required by governmental regulation. Example would be if the buyer's buying VA, the VA requires the seller to pay for the termite inspection. There are some other random things that might fall into place there, but what we're really saying is the buyers are paying for their own inspections. And they can have all of any or all of the following inspections done, and we list them. So they can have one or more licensed or certified inspection services and a home inspection, radon, environmental, lead-based paint, everything. And then at line 162, after the word infestation, which goes with the line before that, it says, or any other inspections desired by the buyer in the exercise of reasonable due diligence. We don't know what those might be, but we can't possibly cover everything that the buyer might want to have inspected. So it says environmental in there. That would cover lead, that would cover a mold, that would cover other things. But we just put that catch-all in there so that the buyer can have any inspections he wants. It goes on to say that the seller agrees to make all areas of the property accessible for these inspections upon reasonable notice, and that all of the utilities must be on during the inspections. So listing agents, make sure you tell your sellers this. That means if they have, and these are two things I've heard within the last week. One of them, home inspector went in and the seller had wallpapered over the electrical box. And in another one, there was a huge wooden bookcase in front of the electrical box. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, first of all, I don't even want to get into what possessed you to wallpaper over your how are you going to change fuses or whatever you need to do. But they did. So they can't. They're going to have to take the wallpaper down. They're going to have to move whatever they need to move, okay? It says that the buyer is going to indemnify the seller and hold them harmless from any loss or damage caused by the acts of the buyer or anyone performing any inspections on the buyer's behalf. I just want to remind you, buyer agents, that you should be making sure that any of the home inspectors you are recommending to your buyers have insurance. They have everything they need, that if they do something to that seller's home, they have insurance to cover all of that. They need to be bonded. They needed to be all of that stuff. And they should be very willing to show you that they've got their insurance. We've had a couple of problems with people using home inspectors, and they are licensed. They have to be a licensed home inspector. So bringing Uncle Louie in, who bought a house 15 years ago, to do the home inspection can't happen here. This calls for a licensed home inspector to do this. Most of them are insured. We found a couple of them that were not, and as luck would have it, those are the ones that caused some problems. So, and then that falls back on the brokerage company, unfortunately, because everything falls back on us. So just make sure they're bonded or licensed. It says here that the request for repairs shall cover only the major components of the real estate, limited to central heating, cooling, plumbing, well system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so a major component is deemed to be in operating condition, not defective. If it does not constitute a current threat to health or safety, it performs the function for which it is intended, regardless of age, or if it is near or at the end of its useful life. So we're back to that. I kind of mentioned it before when I was talking about the personal property issues. This is even more important than that, because we're not talking about dishwashers anymore. We're talking about roofs. We're talking about everything that's in the house. It is not going to be, we're not fixing it, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, just because the inspector said you could need to have it fixed within the next 5 to 7 years. That's ridiculous. So it goes on to say that minor repairs, we're at line 171, routine maintenance items and painting, decorating, or other items of a cosmetic nature, no matter the cost to remedy same, do not constitute defects, are not a part of this contingency, and are not the basis for the buyer to cancel the contract. And any request by the buyer for credits or repairs in violation of everything we just talked about is considered to be a counteroffer, or it is considered to be such that the seller can in fact terminate this contract. So here's the deal, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, please understand, we are not going to, and I know that some of you are going to say, oh my God, she's making this up, but I'm going to tell you none of this is made up. I don't have to make anything up. I just have to listen to you guys every single day. This buyer asked for the pull chains on the ceiling fans to be longer because she couldn't reach them to turn the fan and the light on and off. There were 3 burned out light bulbs and the toilet seat was cracked. If that's the only 3 things you can find wrong with a house, you ought to be thanking your lucky stars you found the only perfect house in all of the land, because, ladies and gentlemen, that's all they mentioned. And when they mentioned it, the seller had, and the way that it happened was that the attorney did not write the letter, thinking back to the attorney modification now. So when the attorney wrote the letter and made it sound like it was a counter offer, and now with the attorney modification the way it is, the bottom line is it blew up on him. So they made the counter offer, made it sound like a counter offer, and the way this is written now, it would have been a counter offer, and the seller killed the contract because they had a backup contract. So for what would have cost them $35 if they'd gone to Menards and bought the pull chains, the light bulbs, and the toilet seat, they lost a house. This is to stop the buyers from coming back to the sellers and asking them for ridiculous things to be fixed in their home. And we're hoping that that is what this is going to, hopefully this will take care of that. It specifically says that the buyer has the right to ask the seller to fix things that are the heating and cooling system, the plumbing, the well system, electrical. If it's the roof, the walls, the windows, the doors, the ceilings, the floors, the appliances and foundation, all of that falls into this. But all of this, cosmetic stuff does not. And pull chains on the ceiling fans, I would think would fall into ridiculous. So by the way, it did. They ended up losing a house. So we really need to make sure that the buyer's aware of all of this. So that took us through the most of that, but we've got some more coming on the top of the next page. The buyer's going to serve notice to the seller or the seller's attorney of any major component defect within 5 business days. Now, we know that if it's lead paint, we've got another 10 days for that. So if they had a lead paint test done, the number of people having number of buyers having lead paint tests done is almost 0. So And the only reason for that is they're just going, okay, I accept the fact there's probably lead paint in here. So 5 business days after the date of acceptance. And then it says the buyer will not send any portion of the inspection report with the notice of what they want repaired unless the inspection report or any part of it is requested in writing by the seller or the seller's attorney. So I do need to talk to you about how we're going to how you need to handle this. There is the problem that was being caused by when we used to say that only that portion of the inspection report that pertained to that which they were asking to have fixed was supposed to be sent. That was not what was happening. The buyer's attorney or the buyer's agent would send the whole 150-page report and the summary, or even just the summary page of the 28 things that the home inspector found, and then say, but we only want 3 things done. So whether it was laziness on their part that they didn't want to separate it out, or the ones amongst us believe that it was a threat. It was a threat to send all of the 28 things to the seller and say, fix our 3, or you're going to have to deal with the 28. Because once a licensed contractor or a home inspector has said there is a problem, the seller cannot ignore the fact that they might have a problem. They need to either repair, refute, or disclose whatever came up. Now, most of the time they were refuting it, and that's all but fine and good, but they still have to take the time to do that. So refuting it means you bring somebody else in other than a home inspector to say whether or not what he found was real. And we're at pretty much running a 50-50 on that. Does that make sense? 50% of the time they come in and say the home inspector was crazy as a loon, and 50% of the time they said, nope, you've got a problem with your roof. So it's a crapshoot. So now no part of the inspection report is going to be sent. So if you're the listing agent and you get an email with the inspection report attached to it, you need to send that email back immediately to the buyer agent or whoever sent it to you. I would suggest that you now say you are in violation of paragraph 12 black blob B of the contract by sending this to me in the first place. Do it nicely, and then say, I did not open the report. I am deleting this home inspection report from my computer, and you are sending it back to them. You need to tell your seller to do the same thing. First of all, I will tell you that nobody should be sending a copy of that home inspection report directly to your seller. Neither the home inspector should, nor should the buyer agent, the buyer's attorney, or the buyer. Nobody should be contacting your seller directly. And call me and talk to me later if they do about filing a complaint if they're a realtor, filing a complaint with them under the code, because they should not be contacting your seller directly. Now, I wouldn't have brought it up if it didn't happen. So you want to tell your seller not to open the home inspection report either. Now, what if your seller says, I don't believe the buyers, I think the buyer's lying. They made all of this up. I'm not fixing the what? I'm not fixing the electrical down in the room addition or whatever they come up with. Then they can ask for a copy of the report that has the that issue mentioned in it. But be careful, because you might get more than you asked for, okay? So after 10 business days after the date of acceptance, if we have not come to an agreement on how we're going to resolve the inspection issues, then either party can terminate this contract. So we are trying to put all of this, home inspection and attorney modification, into that 10 business day time frame so that this doesn't get dragged out ad infinitum, okay? So letter C says that forget everything else I just said. In the event the inspection reveals that the overall condition of this property is totally unacceptable to the buyer, and he serves notice to the seller within that 5 business days, he can walk away from this contract. Now, and his earnest money will be returned, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, remember, in many cases, the earnest money wasn't even deposited yet, because I didn't even bring you my earnest money for my earnest money was coming in 5 business days. This has to be done in 5 business days. So if you really look at the time frames in this contract, they all make good sense. And there's reasons why those days are in there that way, so that the buyers and sellers are as protected as we can possibly make them. So they could walk away from this and there's chances are the earnest money hasn't even been delivered yet. Here's the other issue: they do not deliver any portion of the report to the seller either, unless the seller wants it. Now, tell your seller they don't want it, okay? Just let the buyer go. Here's the other thing, a philosophical thing. There's no way you're going to keep a buyer in a contract if he wants out of it, so let him go. You're better off letting him go now and putting this house back on the market, because he'll find some other way to get out of it. So don't drag this thing out. If the buyer wants out, then the buyer's what? The buyer's let him go. Wish him well and get on with your life. And D basically says that if the buyer does not conduct his inspections and notify the seller within the time that's specified, then he has no rights under this paragraph 12, and the contract's in full force and effect. So your buyer has to make sure that he does his home inspections or whatever inspections he wants to have done within the time frame. Okay, can he ask for an extension to his 5 days to get all of this done if he chooses to? He could. The seller would have to grant it, but he could ask for an extension. The only reason he might want to do that is if, let's say, he's got a good friend that is a home inspector, that home inspector is on vacation and can't come in and do it, then he might want to have an extension, ask for an extension. Please make sure with both of these, the attorney modification and the home inspection paragraph, that you have a list of good real estate attorneys that you can give to your clients, and good home inspectors that you can give to them as well. You want good people involved in your transactions, and they need to be part of your very loosely, not capital, but small t in team, meaning that these are the people that you know do a very, very good job for your clients without going that I almost said something that we're going to have to cut out of here, that aren't going some kind of crazy every single time they get anywhere near a house or anywhere near a contract. So make sure you've got some good people on your team.